Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Boston Balling. I'm your host, Gabby Hurlbut. I hope everyone had an exciting weekend. Was definitely a really interesting Super Bowl, which we obviously are going to touch on a little bit too in this episode. But I hope everyone is having a wonderful start to the week. It's Tuesday, so you're almost halfway through. So if everybody just powers through the rest of the week, it should be good. I have a guest with me tonight. He's very, very talented, knowledgeable about sports. Evan Marinofsky. How are you doing today?
I'm good. How could I not be good after that flattering introduction? Talented and knowledgeable. I'm so appreciative of that. Thanks, Gabby.
You're welcome.
Glad to be here.
No, yeah, we're excited to have you too. Definitely should be a good conversation tonight. We have a lot we want to talk about, so just kind of want to get right into it. And I want to start off with just, why don't you tell people a little bit about your sports background, what you're doing now, and kind of how you got into working in sports?
Well, so basically, I'm currently a senior at UMass Amherst, and when I was a freshman, I knew I wanted to get into journalism, and I played hockey through high school all my life, and my hockey coach in high school got me I thought I wanted to do play-by-play back then. And he's like, I'll get you a gig or like a one-time thing with My Hockey Live, which is a streaming service. It's a good streaming service. And you can do a UMass club game. So I was like, all right. And we had to sell like ads for it. We had to do sales for it. And so finally the game happened. I don't know how we sold enough for it, but we did. I don't remember how that exactly worked because I know my sales efforts were trash, were terrible. But anyways, I got to the game. And it was like 9 o'clock on like a Saturday night. And as a freshman, you got to be going out. You want to be going out with everybody. And to say that, to get all dressed up to go call a club hockey game, you're like, oh, I feel kind of weird. But the person I was called the game with was Jimmy Murphy, who at the time was with CLNS. And at that time, I'd also had an internship with Kirk and Callahan that next summer. I'd already had it planned. I was like way ahead. I was planning my stuff for the next summer. Murph and I called the game. We hit it off pretty well. I was terrible at play-by-play. I realized that night I was not going to go into play-by-play. I was terrible at it. But from then forward, Murph had said to me, if you ever need anything with CLNS or you want any opportunities with Bruins, like, let me know. And I was like, oh, maybe, but I have the Kirk and Callahan thing. That's probably what I'm going to do, but I'll let, whatever. So a few months go by and I don't think I did anything more for My Hockey Live. I think that was like it. And then a few months later, Murph said, hey, like, do you want to live tweet a Bruins playoff game? And I was like, yeah, sure. Like, why the hell not?
Yeah.
So I never gift anything. They didn't do gifts before. So I did that for their account. It did really well. Stayed on with them. They were like, hey, like, do the rest of the playoffs. You can write some stuff too. Did that. And then that overlapped into the KNC internship. And those, I kind of did both with Bruins and that. And then slowly but surely with Bruins, like, I got to cover some games that next year during the regular season, like when I was home for winter break. We only had one seat on the 9th floor, so I would sit. No one knows this. I sat in the media room for like a lot of that year, or when I went to the games, which was always pretty funny because people would think like, oh, you're at the game. And I'm like, I am, but I can't see the ice.
Yeah. They're like kind of, but not really actually watching.
A little bit. Yeah. I'm watching on TV just like you guys. I'm just at the Garden. But so I did that. And then the big thing for me was the playoffs of 2019, the Stanley Cup run, because I signed on with EEI to write stuff for them. And that gave me a seat on the 9th floor. But I did stuff with them. I did stuff with CLNS. I did kind of both of those things. And that sort of helped me, obviously, on Twitter. That helped me just grow in general as a sports, reporter and personality, so to speak. That helped a lot. And that helped me kind of get more eyeballs on me, I guess, in some ways. And from there, that kind of helped me launch more Bruins stuff and get bigger in that community, in that world, so to speak. And then this past summer, I was supposed to intern with weei.com, and do more broad stuff, do Patriots, Red Sox, all that stuff. Obviously, it didn't happen because of COVID. But I guess instead of that, I guess because of COVID, I'm interning with Turner Sports this spring, and it's virtual. So I guess in some ways that made up for it. It's fun, and I'm doing that right now, actually, instead of classes. So I'm doing Turner right now and Bruins. So that's my story in 4 minutes or less.
Congratulations on that. That must be an exciting opportunity for you.
Well, thank you. It's fun. It's it's cool because it's allocated. Like it's an actual shift. It's not like, Bruins, you could be going all night, you could be doing all day, like you have no idea. This,
Yeah.
it's like shifts, and it's kind of fun to be like, oh, I'm working 8 to 4 today, and I know I can just sign on at 8 and sign off at 4. Whereas Bruins and covering stuff, as you know, and doing beat reporting is you don't have a time slot. The game starts at 7, but you got to start getting ready at like 5, 6 o'clock. You got to leave. You probably won't leave there until a while after. So it's fun to have a allotted time slot.
Yeah, exactly. Because you really never know with games either how long those are going to go too, especially if they go to OT and everything else. They have the potential to go really long too. So you really have to plan a big time window when you're working live games. I know how that goes.
Yes. Oh, it's crazy. And it's fun though. It was fun going to Bruins games. The first couple home games was so fun to be going again and stuff. It was very different. Obviously, there weren't fans there. But it was fun to kind of get back in the groove, because covering games from home, it just doesn't do it for me. I love being there and love, kind of being in the action of it. So I do miss going to games and going to the locker room after, but hopefully those days are coming soon.
Yeah, no, that's what we all hope. We hope that this pandemic can kind of come to a resolution soon, and there can be more fans at games and things just kind of go more back to normal, because it's just not the same watching a game without the fans there. It kind of just takes a little away from a lot of the camaraderie and just the environment of the game. The fans are a big part of that. So hopefully things can start to go back to normal relatively soon. But I'm sure it's still cool to be able to be at the games, at least, even though there's not fans there, even though it's a little bit different. It's probably still nice to be able to be at the games.
Oh yeah, no, it's awesome. And you mentioned the fans not being there. It's weird because they don't have the goal light guy. So when the puck goes in the net, there's just no goal light, and you're so used to seeing a goal light, and you're used to like you can put your head down at any game, and just by the roar of the crowd, you can kind of tell if there's something big happening, if there's a big hit, if there's a momentum shift, and like the Bruins will score, and you're just like, oh yeah, they scored. Like it takes them a few minutes to realize they scored. So yeah, exactly. It's pretty weird.
You could easily miss it too. Like I know, like I'll be watching a game and I'll look up and all of a sudden somebody will have just scored a goal and I'll be like, wait, what did I just miss? Like if I look at my
exactly
or something, it's so strange. Yeah.
It's so weird to me.
Yeah, I know. Well, hopefully things can kind of start to go back to normal over the next few months, we would hope, but at least we have sports. I'm grateful for that we have sports, because I know it was tough the period of time when sports weren't even on at all. So that was really frustrating and a tough time for all of us sports fans, I think, not really having much to watch and just
you can only watch so many old games.
Exactly.
I'm sorry. Like at the end of the day, like by mid-April, I was so sick of the old game. I was like, I don't care anymore. I know what happened. Yeah. I can watch the highlights. I don't need to watch the whole game. I don't care. I want real sports back, and I'm glad to have them back.
Yeah, it's not the same experience watching a game that you already know the result and you already know what happened. Because I don't even like watching games back that I missed live and have to go and I just check the score or something. I don't like going back and watching those games really either, because it's like if I know my team won or lost, then it's like, well, what's the point of watching, because I already know how to send it anyway.
Yeah, no, that's the thing. And that's why I've never understood like that aspect of it, like watching an old game and like getting into it. Like it's cool, but I can just watch the highlights on YouTube. I probably already watched the highlights. Like when the Nesson played the Bruins playoff run, like obviously it was cool and it was fun, especially when they had the Zoom call and the players reacted. Like that aspect of it was really cool. I'll give them that. But I personally have already seen the highlights of all of those games 100 times. I know I'm not in it for the thrill. I would much rather just watch the highlights and kind of do all that than watch the game on and I get why they do it, because fans do tune in. It gets ratings, like absolutely. But it is weird because I'm like, I know what happened. I've seen the highlights. It's not that big a deal to me. I miss hockey.
Yeah, I know, exactly. I totally agree with you. So we'll see. Hopefully over the next few months, things can restore to normalcy. And that we are going to talk about a lot of hockey today. But first, briefly, we do need to touch on probably the biggest news in Boston sports right now, which is Tom Brady winning his 7th Super Bowl ring, which is, I think a bittersweet feeling for a lot of Patriots fans, me included. I was rooting for him. I wanted to see him win his 7th ring. And because of everything that he did for the Patriots, I couldn't bring myself to root against him in the Super Bowl. But it was definitely hard also watching him and Gronk go off and have two Super Bowl touchdowns between the two of them. That is kind of a throwback to Patriots world, Brady to Gronk, and having those two touchdowns, I was like, oh, this is just tough to watch, but definitely am happy for him. So I was just curious what your reaction is and what your thoughts are on that.
So it's tough. At the beginning of the year, I was a little pessimistic towards Brady. Not again anything against him, but you see him from a non-New England perspective, and you're like, well, the guy's kind of a tool sometimes.
Yeah.
And the first couple weeks there, I was like, this is going to go so poor down in Tampa. Like, this is going to go badly. And it was kind of funny to see things really not going his way. Like, I remember that 38-3 loss to the Saints. I was like, oh my God, this is a failure. Yeah. This is ridiculous. And then slowly but surely, he turned it around and started to turn it around. And that whole team turned it around. They won like 8 in a row or something to end the season, or to end the season in general. Yeah. And I mean, it really was like, oh, that's the same Brady that's what he did every year here. And you kind of realize like, oh, it's him. And I really did start to like root for him actively down the stretch and in the playoffs. Like at the end of the day, I wanted to see him go to the Super Bowl. It's the best story. Like if it was Chiefs and Packers in the Super Bowl, I wouldn't have cared. Like I really would have, like I would watch the game, but I wouldn't have cared that much. Like it would have, oh, Rodgers versus Mahomes, so what? And Mahomes would have killed the Packers, and the Packers were lost. But yeah. With Brady and Mahomes and next gen or versus the GOAT and like that whole aspect of it, and the New England perspective and the Bill Belichick perspective of like, did the Patriots really mess this up? And on that, I don't ever really get to speak about the Patriots. So this is sort of like my moment to speak about the Patriots.
Yeah, that's why I was the perfect time to do it.
Yeah, let me say my piece. But no, I think it's funny. Like, I think if Brady had stayed here, people obviously see what Brady did in Tampa and they go, oh, he would have brought them to the Super Bowl. And I think at the same time, like, no, because they weren't willing to put the pieces around him. Like, he would not have had Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Antonio Brown, Leonard Fournette, Ronald Jones. He would not have had the O-line. He wouldn't have had the great, as great a defense because guys were opting out in New England. Like, you wouldn't have had that. Like maybe you go 10-6, 11-5, and you get in the playoffs and you're out in the first round or the wild card, whatever it is, fine. But like if Bill goes out and gets Jimmy Garoppolo this offseason and gets them to the playoffs next year, I'm not going to sit here and say it's overwhelmingly Brady in the Brady versus Bill discussion. But if he goes out and gets Jimmy G and they do nothing, or he goes out and gets and drafts, a crappy quarterback, or doesn't do anything, or gets somebody bad, and doesn't address the rest of the roster, like the AFC East is only going to get harder. The Dolphins are good. Both the Jets and the Dolphins are in on Deshaun Watson. So one of those two is probably going to get him.
Or the Texans, so.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Then you have the Bills, who are very good.
They're going to be good for a while.
Good for a while. The Jets also, I read today, are in on Juju Smith-Schuster and Will Fuller. Like, this is not your parents' AFC or our AFC East, I guess. It's kind of weird to say, but it isn't the AFC East we're used to. So, from the Brady versus Bill perspective, I think Bill has a lot to do. I'm not going to say Bill has to win a Super Bowl next year because I don't think he does. But after the way that Gronk and Brady performed on the national stage, it would look really bad if the Patriots came out next year and had a very similar year to this year, or were worse. Because they were not they weren't horrendous this year. They were just boring, and they weren't anything we're used to. So that's my Patriots minute.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And this is what I've been preaching for a while with the Patriots, is that even if Brady had stayed in New England this year, I do think he would have gotten them to the playoffs just because he's Brady, and Cam just didn't really have that kind of capacity like Brady did. I think they would have gone to the playoffs, maybe snuck in as a wild card. They would not have finished with a losing record, but they would certainly not have gone all the way because he didn't have the weapons regardless. And with the Patriots, there's a lot of pressure on them this offseason because they need a quarterback, but they also need to get weapons for whoever that quarterback is. So it doesn't necessarily, whether they draft a quarterback or they get a quarterback either by signing Jimmy G or through free agency, they need weapons regardless. So it's definitely going to be a lot of pressure on them this offseason. I think with Bill, when he was watching that game, I hope he kind of realized what he did and the mistake that he made. And I am happy for Brady and Gronk. I think that, they were on a good team, and Brady just proved that he really is the undisputed GOAT. So definitely bittersweet feeling for Patriots fans, but we wish him nothing but the best in his next, who knows how long he'll even be playing anymore. But however long it is, we'll see. But Patriots will always still be number one.
Oh, also the other thing is Brady's the GOAT. I don't even if he lost this game, I don't think there's anyone who's like, oh, now he's not the GOAT. Like, he's been the GOAT. Like, that's one thing with this where people are like, oh, he's the GOAT. It's like, we know he's the GOAT. Like, there was never I haven't seen anybody credible disputing him being a GOAT or being the GOAT, not a GOAT, but the GOAT after the 6 Super Bowls he'd already won. Like, now it's just gravy at this point. It's not like this. Like, I think what made him the greatest of all time was the Falcons Super Bowl. I think that was what got him to that level, because the Seahawks one was impressive as hell, but that got him to 4, which was tied with Montana. The Falcons one was 5, and it was also a 28-3 comeback, and people were like, okay, this guy's the greatest. So that to me, like, this doesn't do anything in the greatest of all time argument. It's just like, it's gravy. It's something he'd never done before. Like, every Super Bowl is a different thing. And this was his first blowout Super Bowl, which was even crazier. Like, the previous blowout was that boring Rams Super Bowl in 2018, and that was 13-3
blowout either. Yeah, it was only a 10-point game, so
it was a fourth quarter drive still. So this was different. I would have killed for the Patriots. It would have been amazing to sit back and just kind of kick your feet back in a Super Bowl, which we never got to do. But that's neither here nor there.
I know. Yeah. Well, we're happy for Brady. He definitely is still not done. I think he has a couple more years, but we'll see what happens this offseason. And I definitely appreciate your Patriots input, because I know that's, the talk of the town in the Boston area right now. So definitely exciting, but we will move on to hockey now. I know we will get a lot into the Bruins too, but I know that you do cover some college hockey, which is pretty cool also. So I know that UMass this year, they were kind of on a run. They had like a 7-game win streak, and then they lost a couple games, and then they now seem to kind of be back on track with winning. So what are some things with them this year that you feel like are strong for them this year and makes them kind of competitive with other teams?
They're deep. That's the biggest thing. They're deep. Obviously, a few years ago, they had Cale Makar, Mario Ferraro. Both have gone on to have really good NHL careers. Obviously, Cale was the Calder Trophy winner last year. He's pretty good. But now, they lost John Leonard after last year, who's now with the Sharks organization. They lost Mitchell Chafee. They lost their 2 biggest offensive scorers. So the question coming into this year was how they're going to get offense. And it's been a scores by committee type thing. The depth has kind of carried them. They're really good on defense. They're very, very deep on D. They have 4 legitimate lines, which is something that they've not always had. They have 2 really good goalies who would be starters pretty much anywhere else, minus maybe BC. But they are a very deep team. That is their MO. That is what is going to carry them. Fingers crossed that it actually happens through the Hockey East playoffs and through the NCAA tournament. But they're right now on pause. All athletics at UMass is on pause due to a huge spike in COVID cases here in Amherst. So it's unfortunate, because they were really starting to get going. Because they, as you said, they'd won 7 in a row. They stumbled a little bit against Providence, and they stumbled a little bit against I believe it was BU. If memory serves, it was BU
in a row against BU after their win streak.
Yes, so those were the 2, and then they tied Providence twice. Both games went to a shootout, very low scoring, but then they beat Lowell twice this past weekend, or 2 weekends ago. So they have what it takes. They do. They absolutely have what it takes to make a run, to go deep. Because I think that what sustains them is not like one-line scoring, which is something we'll get to with Bruins. It's deep. They are a deep team, and anybody can score. any night, and the defense is very solid. They're coached really well. Carvel is probably maybe the best coach in Hockey East, definitely in the top 3. He's very highly regarded. So his systems, his defensive systems are very good. And then the goaltending, if one guy's not doing well, they throw the other guy in and he does better. So that's what happened in 2019 when Murray started the first playoff game, was bad. They benched him for Lindbergh, came in, and Lindbergh took him to the national championship. So I expect them to make a run. I think they expect to make a real run. So that should be very interesting to see how that all pans out.
Yeah, and I know that the Hockey East is pretty competitive overall. There's some other good teams there, but it seems like they have a lot of the pieces to be able to be competitive and really make a run this year. And as you said before, depth is super important in hockey. And the fact that they have that, they have a lot going for them. So I guess it's just a matter of just seeing how the rest of the season goes and maintaining some of that positive energy and momentum as they approach, later in the season.
Yeah, it's really right now, it's between BC and UMass. Those are the two. And BC has the star power with Spencer Knight. And UMass has a little bit of the culture and that whole aspect of things. So again, it would have been amazing to see UMass and BC play last year. Seeing them play this year will be really cool. I hope seeing them play in the playoffs this year would be awesome, because I know all teams are supposed to make the Hockey East playoffs. So yeah, hopefully that happens. But yes, the UMass team, very, very, very good and very deep, which is important.
Yeah, that's super exciting. And glad that we were able to hear a little bit about that too, because I know that they have a strong program, and UMass sports in general are pretty strong. So I'm sure you're probably excited to see how the rest of their season goes and how everything pans out there.
Yes. Oh, yes. Very excited. And the football team could use some work, but everything else is good. It's funny. It's a really good athletic program, and it's Ryan Bamford is the AD. He's very, very good, young, vibrant, like very into it. They've kind of had this big push of culture on all the teams. They've hired coaches who kind of push that culture aspect. Carvel being kind of the lead guy. The women's basketball team has been a really good example of that. Every year they're better and better. This year they're very good with Tori Verdi. And the basketball teams stumbled at times. They have a young Matt McCall, who's a good coach, but they've stumbled. I know UMass basketball Twitter is very active, and they, whenever he's not doing well, they call for him to be fired. But they have a good mindset with UMass. It's tough because it's Amherst, it's not Boston. And Amherst, it's Western Mass. It's like barely even Massachusetts by this point. So, and it's been weird for someone who grew up near Boston and Metro West growing up. It's been weird to come out here because you're so far from Boston and everything. And like the closest city is like Springfield or like Hartford, Connecticut. And it's like, oh, those aren't cities. It's a good program and it's a good school.
Yeah, well, I grew up in Connecticut, so I know how that goes. But it's a good city, but you definitely go to a good sports school, so I'm sure that's exciting. And so now we definitely can move on to some Bruins talk. This is actually a really fun topic to talk about now. So this Bruins team, before the season started, was a team that there were a lot of question marks around. They lost a couple key players on defense, and there's a lot of young talent on the team and not really knowing how they were going to mesh with the veteran players, but they're looking really, really good right now. They've had some really good wins recently. Pasta being back, I think, makes a difference too. And they just seem to really be coming together, and they work hard. And I've been calling them the comeback kings lately because they seem to be comfortable when they go down 3-0 in games and decide to come back. So what are your thoughts on how the season's gone so far?
I mean, it's been way better than I think most people expected. I had said after all the Chara stuff had died down, and I said, I don't have high hopes or high expectations for Zaboral and Lozon on that left side, but I don't think it's not going to be as bad as people say it's going to be. And I was almost wrong in saying that because it's been way better. And I think that's, when you look, it's funny, the first couple weeks, the issues were what you thought the issues were not going to be. The issue was 5-on-5 scoring to start. The issue was the right side of Krejci and the right side in general. You had DeBrusque go down. You had Kasha go down. Kasha, you don't even know when he's going to come back. And, it was kind of like a bizarro Bruins world where like Nick Ritchie was carrying the offense and, Jacob Zaboral was stepping up big on defense. This is weird. Like what happened to the Bruins I'm used to.
Yeah.
But
very strange.
Very strange. But as the season's again taking shape, you're starting to see everything fit into place a little more. Nick Ritchie, obviously Nick Ritchie mania is fun. And it's kind of funny how everyone turned to love Nick Ritchie, but the truth is he just does his job. He's nothing special. You're not getting, you didn't pick up Connor McDavid in that deal, but he is a good net front presence on the power play. And I think that's really kind of all that matters. I mean, 5-on-5, he's not anything great. Like it's obvious to see, there's not a ton to him, but he is great on the power play. He's good in front of the net and digging in corners and good credit to him for that. Yeah. But overall, I mean, they've looked really good. And, again, they're beating good teams. Those comebacks came against Philly and Washington. Like those are your two those are your two biggest rivals right now in the East. So that's a big deal. It's not like you came back against the Sabres and the Devils. Like you came back against legitimate teams. So there's that aspect of it. On defense, there hasn't been much change except for Grzelcyk. Clifton will probably come out for Grzelcyk, I would assume. But I mean, again, Zaboral's held up well. He's been protected. His minutes have been mainly offensive zone starts and spending a lot of time in the offensive zone. He doesn't, his job is pretty much just like don't mess up in the defensive zone and just get the puck in other people's hands, which he's good at. So, again, good. I think the real one is Jeremy Lauzon. I think the way he's come into his own as like a top pairing left shot defenseman has been really beneficial to that team. That is one of the biggest things. The fact that Lauzon is able to, legitimately pair and face top opponents with Charlie McAvoy, I think has been one of the biggest things. Because again, a third pairing defenseman like Zaboral, you can insert him in and out. You can put more in there if Zaboral was bad. Like it's not that big a deal. But to have a legit top four or top pairing left shot defenseman, I think has been huge.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think they've looked really good so far. They've definitely exceeded my expectations. And when you were saying at the beginning of the season they were struggling with what we didn't think they were going to be struggling with, that's exactly right. Because the defensive end was what I was mainly concerned about and how things were going to pan out with that blue line and everything. And I was like, oh, that might be somewhere where they struggle. But with the 5-on-5 scoring, when I was like, this team just can't put anything in regular 5-on-5 scoring, I don't know what it is, but it's frustrating to watch. And I would be sitting in front of my TV like, oh my gosh, like what is going on here? This is not the same Bruins team we're used to watching. But then, they have a lot of momentum now, and I am a little bit concerned with the COVID stuff and everything else. And I'm happy that they're able to play tomorrow, but they've had a little bit of a break now. And I think that I'm excited. I'm really optimistic about this team. They definitely work hard, and it's exciting knowing that you can't count them out of games now. I mean, going down 3-0, I really thought that those games were over, and it happened twice, 2 games in a row.
I know, it kept happening.
And then unfortunately they lost the first one barely in OT, and then come back and win the second one after Pasta's amazing hat trick. So thanks to him for that. That was exciting too. So it's almost like maybe we need them to be trailing and then come back and win games, because it seems like they have a lot of momentum when they're coming into the third period and they're down. Because even against Philly, that was they came back then, and Washington is legit too. So I think that coming into the season, the expectations that we had, they're showing that they can exceed that, and they're showing that a lot of those young players really have the potential to do really big things in this league. Because to me, it was kind of a mix of the veterans and the young guys, and what was going to happen with the in-between. How was everybody going to mesh, and was there going to be a good balance between all of those players? And I think that with the window closing on some of the veterans like Krejci and Bergeron even, I think that it's exciting that there's a lot of young talent coming up now that could really establish a good future for the Bruins. Because I had a similar discussion about them before the season started, and we were saying how there could be some frustration for years to come for a little bit of time, just because the veteran players, their window is almost gone, and then there's going to be some rebuilds with the young guys. But the young guys are performing really, really well. So I actually am excited for the future over the next few years. And as those veteran players kind of start to reach their end, we have players that we know can come up and step into those types of roles already.
Yeah, and I think the question really comes down to, can a guy like Zaboral and Lozon, Stednica, can they hold up, especially Zaboral and Lozon, can they hold up in a 7-game playoff series? Can they hold up for 2 to 3 months of intensive playoff hockey? Can they do that? We saw Connor Clifton do it in 2019 and kind of jump onto the scene. But obviously, you have your reservations with Zaboral. Lozon, I think, will become more of a steady presence. Cassidy loves Lozon. So yeah. I think that, that's going to be the big question. Again, it's like 13 games into the season, I think.
Yes.
I believe, or 12. It might be 12 or 13.
These games obviously aren't going to matter down the stretch in the next couple months when it's approaching playoff time. But so, yeah, you're right. It's that longevity thing. And can they sustain this for the rest of the season? Can they really do that in the playoffs when they're playing all good teams and it's an intense playoff setting and they have to last for these long series against different teams?
And that's a big thing, especially for a guy like Jeremy Lozon, because in the playoffs, in those series, you're playing, if you're a guy like Lozon on the top pairing, you're almost playing the same line from the other team almost every shift. If you're playing the Caps, you're going to be playing the Ovechkin line. If it's the Penguins, it's the Crosby line. So that aspect of it is like, can you sustain yourself for 4 to 7 games against the other team's best line? And I think that's going to be something that, you'll see out of Lozon over the next couple months where he fits into that. But again, you're right. You're 100% right that this rebuild, because it's like another one of these. They had these in 2014 to 16. Another one of these where it's like they're doing it on the fly. And it looks good so far. It looks like it's working. But again, Stednika's been on the lineup. DeBrusk's been on the lineup. So it'll be interesting to see when those guys come back in, what ends up happening.
Which in a way is promising because they're beating good teams without them right now. So they're showing that they can do it. So it's like, yeah, when they come back, it'll be interesting, I think, to see kind of how things go then and if they can still maintain this level of play that they're playing now that the scoring has finally improved. And with Rask, I've seen a lot of mixed feelings on him this season too, because some people are like, oh my gosh, I love Rask. He's had an incredible year. And other people are like, well, he's still not reliable. I just don't trust him enough. Do you feel like he's still somebody that can be reliable for the rest of the season and the postseason? Because I really do like a lot of what I've seen from him this year.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. I think he's 100% the guy. His numbers this year have not been great. I was looking at some of his more advanced statistics, the high danger save percentages, kind of all those types of numbers weren't great or haven't been great thus far. But again, the record's really good. Yeah. He's been huge in overtime, like in clutch moments, really in the end of third periods and in overtimes. He's been money. He has been absolutely money. It's weird deflections in the second period. It's, there was that game, the first game against the Capitals where they came back in. He wasn't that great in. I kind of thought he might have been injured, but then he looked good in the next game. So it's like, maybe he's not injured. Maybe it's just an off night. But the thing with Rask, he's your guy. He's the guy. He is, because you don't have anybody behind him that's going to get you through a playoff series. Halak, can step in. Halak can step in a lot during the regular season, but he's not your guy in the playoffs. He's also not the future. Neither Rask nor Halak is young. And then Vladar and Swayman and them are way too young for starting time. So all these people claiming they want Rask gone, it's like, well, who do you want instead of him?
Yeah, that's what I was too. I'm like, well, what do you suggest as a replacement for him then? Why do you want him gone? Who do you think would be better in that position?
And the other thing is, and this is the thing that always gets brought up. People go, well, Jordan Binnington won a cup. Anton Khudobin brought a team to the cup. You can do this for way cheap. And it's like, yes, but the probability of you picking the right guy out of the free agent bucket in the offseason that's going to randomly take you to the Stanley Cup is so minute. It's so small. Like, you're going to pick up Brian Elliott. He's going to bring you to the Stanley Cup final. Like, it's so like lightning in a bottle with guys like that. So Rask is not lightning in a bottle. Rask has taken 2 teams to the final. I know he hasn't won them, but he's taken them there and he's gotten them through that. And everyone loves to place blame on Rask for 2019, especially for the, not beating the Blues. Where was the first line in that series? Someone tell me. The numbers were trash for that first line in that series. That's why they're not the perfection line, because they were so imperfect in that series.
That was
so it's always interesting. It's always interesting to me because it's like in Game 7 they scored 1 goal and it was a Matt Grizzly garbage time goal. It's the most depressing home goal I've ever witnessed in my life. The weirdest, oddest, like the goal. They should have even let the goal horn go off. But the point is, the Rask hate. You can get on him for, the stuff a few years ago. You can get on him for the last game of the 2016 season, whatever. But right now, I don't think there's any reason to worry. And I don't see like who is going to come in and do better.
That's what I ask everybody on social media, Twitter especially. That's like, well, we need to get rid of Rask. And it's like, well, who do you propose as an alternative? Who do you realistically see as somebody that could come in and actually fill those shoes? Because, I mean, you're right. He's shown that he can bring teams to the finals, and he's shown that he's reliable. And it is frustrating to watch, especially the last few years, their playoff performances as a whole. But it's nowhere close to just being on him. And there's so many other positions that didn't show up, especially in that 2019 finals run. That series just hurt, because that really I thought was going to be their year, and they had so much momentum going into that series that I really thought that was going to be their year. And then so many people just didn't perform. It
was that layoff.
Yeah.
Remember that 10-game layoff, 10-day layoff in between the conference final and the Stanley Cup final.
Yeah, no, that definitely was that was what did it. And it's momentum is a huge thing in this sport. And if you have breaks like that and you have all this momentum, things can so very easily change. And that's why even with this COVID thing, I worry about this season, because even in 2020, we saw the Bruins dominating before the COVID break. They were playing so well, and they were really heavy favorites to go and go all the way really last year too. And I thought that they had a good chance last year. Then COVID hit. They had that huge months of time off. They came back and they just weren't playing as well. And that's, it's hard when you have those types of breaks and you come back to maintain the same type of momentum you had before. And so I'm hoping that for this season that the whole COVID situation just kind of gets under wraps, and that we don't have these constant issues like we're having now. And luckily this little stint that they have here with games being postponed, luckily it's not even going to end up being a full week since they played last before they play tomorrow, which is good for us, but it could be a lot worse with the situation we're in. So I'm just hoping that there aren't enough issues with COVID this year where they can kind of maintain what they're doing, because they are playing some really good hockey right now. And even when people count them out of games, they'll come back and score a goal, and it'll be like, all right.
It's funny. These games are so boring through the first and second period. You're like, a random mid-season game.
All those penalties in the first period. And I was like, this is just not a good start for the Bruins. This is so frustrating. And then the Flyers scored 1 goal in the second period. And I was like, wow, what a thrilling game we're watching right now. But then that third period, everything just got super exciting.
Yeah, no, it was incredible. And this whole run, this little stretch. And it's funny, I tweeted this right before the Bruins come back against the Flyers, either the first or second time. But I was like, as boring as this game has been, I will take this any day over the hell we went through. That was like, no sports from April to July. Remember there was that weird stretch where people were getting obsessed with the Korean Baseball League?
Yeah,
I don't know if you remember that. Like,
because it was the only thing on.
Yeah, like people would be getting up at like 2 a.m. to watch a Korean Baseball League half across the world, and it was like, this is crazy. But
like, this is what we've come to right now, because this is what sports. So if people want their sports, this is what it's going to be.
This is what we've come to, and just like the time after the playoffs ended. I mean, remember there was that stretch from like August to October where every sport was playing. Like Bruins were like. NHL was playing, NBA was playing, NFL was playing, MLB was playing. It was everything all the time, and it was amazing. And then just gone. And then it was all gone after October, and it was just NFL for a while. So I will take
because 3 out of those 4 sports were in playoff time too. So you were in time for hockey, basketball, and baseball. So all those sports coming back at the same time after we had that long break, it was just such a big reward for people for kind of dealing with this few months of not being able to watch anything. Sports were coming back on in the most exciting time to watch them, which was their playoff time for all 3 of those sports. And then, football was starting, and there's always obviously a lot of hype around football from beginning of the season through the Super Bowl. Anyways, people were excited for football starting too. And then, like you just said, when baseball, hockey, and basketball all ended and it was just football, it was like, okay, yeah, now we're kind of getting back into a little bit more normalcy because there's always a period of time when it's just football.
Yeah, and that was the thing. And it's so nice to have the NBA back and the NHL back. It's tough, though, to see these postponements because you wonder if the league is going to say, let's just take a 2-week pause. I don't expect them to do that, though. I would expect them to continue to just go. And I think the NFL sort of set the standard for that. Like the NFL, if you remember back at the beginning, had a billion COVID cases. I mean, you had so many weird instances like the Broncos game where they had the practice squad wide receiver play quarterback. But they just powered through it. They just kind of I don't know if it was luck or if everybody just got COVID and then they were immune to it. But they just kind of kept powering through it. And I feel like with a lot of these sports, you kind of just have to accept that this is going to happen. I also think the NHL has the right idea by only playing the people in your division and just completely realigning everything.
Yeah,
I don't know why. I don't know.
And how that whole situation is kind of.
I don't know why the Celtics are traveling to Golden State or to LA. I don't understand the reasoning behind it. And granted, I don't think any team wants to go to Florida right now. But if you're near it, sorry. But I do think that everything should be localized because bubbles you can't do. Because, again, bubbles are great for COVID, but horrendous for mental health. And, these guys have families and they have lives that they'd like to kind of live. And the bubbles don't allow for that. Now, the bubbles were fine when you had to just bang out the end of a season. But now you're in a season, so bubbles aren't going to work. So you just have to kind of, maybe this is unpopular, but you just got to grind through it. You just have to be as careful as you can, and you just have to power through. It sucks. It blows. The Coyotes and the Blues are playing 7 straight games. Imagine being a Blues fan and having to watch your team play the Coyotes 7 straight times.
Oh, I know.
Holy crap.
I can't. I couldn't do it.
I couldn't do it. But again, you just have to keep powering through it. That's going to be just forge ahead.
Even 2 in a row is plenty for me. Even the 2 in a row, I'm like, oh yeah, team, and now we have to watch them play the same team again. Even the 2 in a row is a little repetitive for me, but I do like the idea of how they're handling it, and I think that this is the best way to do it, and I think the NBA probably should have done something similar. And when I first saw the format of how everything was going to be set up, I was a little bit skeptical, and I was like, oh, is that going to take away from some of the competitive aspect and the exciting part of the game? But I really haven't found that it does. There's a lot of competitive teams in the Bruins division, so it's really exciting actually to watch them play a lot of those teams.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, I mean, again, you don't have the Maple Leafs or the Canadians, but you do have the Flyers, you have the Penguins, you have the Capitals, you have teams that and again, rivalries are created. A few years ago, let's say pre-2013, the Maple Leafs Bruins rivalry was not big. It just kind of created itself. Yeah. Prior to 2015, 2016, the Lightning Bruins rivalry was not a rivalry, even after the conference final, because they only met once.
Yeah.
But now it became a rivalry. So again, these, Bruins Flyers, Bruins Capitals, Bruins Penguins could easily become rivalries. So I think that can just kind of happen. And again, playing teams twice in a row, you get that in the second game, especially as you're seeing now.
Because it's like you have a team win, and then you can tell usually every time this happens that in the second game, the other team kind of comes out with a different kind of firepower than they did in the first game because nobody wants to get swept in the 2-game series either. So they'll come out when it's usually a completely different game from one game to the next, even though they're playing the same team. And that's been the cool thing about it, I think. And even with the Bruins, they come out and they play the same team 2 games in a row, but the way that the game is played ends up being completely different from the last game, almost as if they're not playing the same team.
Yeah, and that's the fun part is that it's different. And again, it's nice to have hockey back. That's really what it comes down to. as we talked about, like I would watch the Bruins play my high school team, if it meant watching live hockey. But yes, the games are different from game to game. Teams do different things. Obviously, it's easy to pick up on stuff after one game. So, and it's also nice, as I said, the rivalries. Trent Frederick and Tom Wilson's a perfect example of that. After one game, that wouldn't have happened. After two, it did. So things like that are very exciting as well.
Yeah, no, it definitely is. They have the Rangers the next two games, tomorrow and Friday. What are you looking for from that series? What do you think are going to be the keys for those two games?
Score a ton. The Rangers are terrible defensively. They're have had real troubles around their own net.
Yeah.
Score. Like, this is where you just get point nights. This is where you guys grow their confidence. If DeBrusk returns for these games, he says he feels healthy and all. These are where DeBrusk can kind of flip the switch on his season. Do a complete 180 with his game. Guys in the lineup who have the David Krejci, the second line. This is where you kind of maybe find your stride. DeBrusk returns. Do you keep Nick Ritchie there? Do you put Kuhlman there? Like, what do you do? This is where you sort of try to gain some chemistry. Not to say these games are easy, because after I just said that, now they're going to be really hard. But this is where you just explode offensively. And this is where you just kind of, put up a lot of points. It's point night. And that's what needs to happen. This is what this team needs. Every team needs a team like this where they can hang, 6 goals on. Again, it might not be that way. The Rangers might tighten it up. The Bruins might be terrible on offense. But at the same time, I do think that this is what I'm looking for. And I think what they're looking for is, go in there and let guys get hot, guys build their confidence and kind of go that route.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. That's exactly what I was going to say too. That scoring is going to be a key, because if they put up a lot of points, then I really don't see the Rangers being able to stop that and actually realistically compete in these games. So this is their opportunity for some of these players to step up on the offensive end and really show that they can put up a lot of points per night, because they've had a couple games where they have put up a lot of points. And that's the type of Bruins team that needs to show up for these next couple games if they want to win these games. And we know that they have people that can score. It's just a matter of doing that and not slipping back into the ways of not being able to score in regular 5-on-5 shooting.
Yes, and that's where the Jake DeBrusk stuff comes in. Like, DeBrusk was doing nothing when he was in the lineup to start the season.
He was just kind of there, but not really being productive at all.
Yeah, and also for a guy like Charlie Coyle as well. Like, Coyle, again, people expect him to be the next second line center with the money he's making with Krejci's deal being up after this year. And it's like the play is there. The offensive zone time is there. The production is not. So it's games like this. Where you come through with a 2 to 3 point night. If you're Krejci, if you're Coyle, if you're DeBrusk, and that kind of can turn everything around. That can be a big turning point for their lines.
Maybe another hat trick from Pasta. I'm just kidding.
Oh, yes. That'll happen. Somehow that'll happen. He'll steal all the scoring.
He'll find a way to do it. Yeah, I'm excited. I think it should be fun. We have a question from the crowd here that came up recently that I'm putting up here. How did you feel after Chara left? For me, I personally felt very, first of all, concerned about the state of the team on defense after he left, but also it was emotional, and especially when they played that game and he came and scored a goal in that game for Washington.
That's classic.
And I was like, my heart just hurt a little bit just watching him score that goal.
That was perfect. I loved that. I loved every second of it. Obviously it sucked to see him go. It was really unfortunate to see how he left and how it wasn't like no one knew it was the last time that Chara was on the ice for the Bruins. And it was like, it just happened here. Like, he wanted Chara to retire a Bruin and like his final game to be like a big standing ovation. And it'd be, a nice event for him or something, but he'll get that at some point. I don't doubt that. At the time I said the Bruins are screwed. They've done nothing to improve the left side. They're going to have Jacob Zaboral there. They're going to have, Jeremy Lozon and John Moore. And it's going to be just a mediocre team, and it's just not going to be good. And, you're wasting years of this core. You're wasting years of Krejci and Bergeron and Rask and Marchand and, and all that. And you lost Krug as well, which I was fine with, but like, you had to improve, and they never did. Yeah. But turns out it's worked out fairly well. Again, like Fluto Shinzawa wrote a piece about this like 2 weeks ago or a week ago, about how the Bruins defensive advanced stats have actually been better this year. And they've been better in their own zone because you can do more with foot speed. Obviously with Chara was slow. That was the worst kept secret anywhere. Chara is very slow. It was all about his stick, and it worked for a while, but now you have a bunch of guys who can skate and who actually, have foot speed and stuff. And so you can base defense around that, which is a little bit easier. And you can leave the net front more and all that stuff. Ironically enough, the Capitals have also seen a big improvement. It's worked out for them with Chara. So, and Fluto wrote this, and I agree. Both sides ended up it worked out for both. Chara's actually done well with the Capitals. They're putting him on the power play, which is just nuts. Like, that is wild. Yeah. That is crazy to put him on the power play, but whatever. You do you, Washington. But it's worked out.
That was weird to see.
Yeah, it stunk to see him go. It did. I mean, I grew up loving the guy. But it's fortunately for both sides, it's actually worked out pretty well.
Yeah, I when you say that you thought they were screwed, that was my exact reaction too. Because right after he left, I did a show on the Bruins, and this exact same point was brought up. That was like, well, they haven't done anything to improve that side. So what are they realistically going to do? That this defense is really going to struggle this year. And it's crazy to look at their numbers this year that they've put up, and it's like, wow, they really didn't miss a beat, and it really doesn't seem like there's a hole there, and they actually are playing really, really good defense this year.
They are. It's funny. I was talking about this on Bruins Beat last week, and I was like, do the Bruins, have you noticed Chara being gone? Have you noticed Krug being gone? And the answer is no. You really haven't. You haven't. Grzelcyk stepped in on the power play, which we all kind of assumed, and that's why I wasn't dying for the Bruins to hand Krug a 7-year deal because of something like that. Again, I wanted Krug to get his money. That's why I wasn't I wanted Krug to get all the money he could possibly get. He's a great guy. He's worked his butt off. He's, overcome everything. But for the fact that they almost went out and got Oliver Ekman-Larsson made no sense to me. That was one of those what are you doing deals?
Yeah. Me too. I was sitting there going, what is the thought process behind this?
If you're gonna do that, just pay Krug. Why would you want 9.5? Why would you want to pay a 9.5 for an aging, not very great, not worth at all $9.5 million left shot defenseman? I just didn't make any sense to me.
It really was not. I was sitting there and I was like, this really is not an upgrade to me. Why don't you just give Krug the money and just keep him?
Exactly. You'd actually end up saving money. But at any rate, you haven't noticed it. You haven't noticed, and again, I still think at the deadline they should acquire a left shot defenseman. I think that would be good. It's going to be tough. Who's available, the COVID restrictions, all that stuff. But I think they should. I think they really should at the deadline try to acquire that.
Yeah, I agree too. I think that would make a big difference. And I still really like what I'm seeing from them. And we did have another comment here that's a good point, saying that they're winning.
It's true. They are.
That is a good point, though, because that's always something that we know that they've struggled with.
Ed's right. No, Ed's 100% right. Last year they were god awful at shootouts. Remember, the season started the year started with Brad Marchand missing the puck in Philly. It ended. It wasn't 2020. It was 2021, obviously, but it was in January. It was almost a year later where he scored the winning goal against Philadelphia in the shootout. It was in a shootout. Or it was overtime. Yeah. He had a winning goal against them, because I remember being like, "Oh my god!" Just a year later, this happened. So yes, winning shootouts again.
That's proven
gotta love it.
Something that has been important for them this year too, because they've had so many games that have not ended in regulation either.
Yes. Oh yes.
So yeah, that's a really good point too. I figured I would flag that comment because when I was reading that, I was like, yeah, that's actually a really important thing too, because we know how terrible they've been with shootouts. So I'm glad that they obviously figured something out there, and as a consequence of that, it was the 5-on-5 that suffered. But now they're finally seeming to get everything back together. So I'm excited for the rest of the season, though. I really do think that it's going to be a good rest of the season for them, and I look forward to just seeing what happens when they get some of these other guys back and them being worked into the mix and just continuing to hopefully maintain this energy and momentum, because I really, really like what I've seen.
I agree. I'm interested to see it. I'm excited to see it and see how it all goes down.
Yeah, no, for sure. And thank you again. I definitely appreciate you being on the show with me tonight. Thanks everybody again for listening as always, especially everybody that tunes in every week. I really, really do appreciate you guys and your constant support of Boston Balling. This episode, you know where it will be. It's on all podcast streaming platforms. You can subscribe to Boston Balling that way, or you can subscribe to the show on any social media. You can follow it on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all of that fun jazz. And so everybody, I hope you have a good rest of your Tuesday night. That concludes tonight's episode of Boston Balling. I'll see you all next time and have a great rest of your week. Happy Tuesday, everyone.